Welcome to the Open to Love Summit. My name is Masuma Tamim, and I'm your host. For those of you who are on a journey to recovery from betrayal trauma, narcissistic abuse, and people pleasing, and now, in order for you to create, besides doing the journaling session, in order for you to create those healthy relationships, we have a licensed marriage and family therapist here. Her name is Kristin Snowden, and I actually found her on YouTube. I found her channel on YouTube about a year ago, and she just perfectly described what I went through. And I was like, where was this like 8 years ago? And so I wish I had come across her work, but that's okay because we're all on our own journeys, and I'm here to share her resources with you. Again, she's a licensed marriage family therapist and life coach who specializes in crisis couples issues, addiction recovery, intimacy disorders, and trauma treatment. She has a specialty training in 3 evidence-based trauma treatments, such as eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, commonly known as EMDR, internal family system, IFS, and polyvagal theory. She's also certified in Daring Way Facilitator, which is based on Dr. Brene Brown's research on shame and vulnerability. Kristin runs a private practice in Westlake Village, California. She has a YouTube channel, like I mentioned, and she creates regular content for sexandrelationshiphealing.com. Kristin was the intimacy disorders specialist at Avalon Malibu, a treatment center for substance abuse and mental health disorders. Before that, she ran and developed the first dually focused drug and sex addiction treatment program in the world, the Sex Abuse and Intimacy Disorders program at Promises Malibu under Rob Rice. And with that, I would like to welcome you, Kristin. Thank you so much for being my guest today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. So I've been asking all my speakers to give us a little bit of a background on how they even chose this path, because it's not for the faint of heart, the things that you do, the things that you help everyone with, the traumas and like the relationship stuff, which is, there's no book for it. So how did you get into this body of work?
I mean, I have such a strange labyrinth story of how I ended up working in the world of sex addiction and intimacy disorders. But if it was up to me originally, I was going to be an attorney. And then I realized I kind of want to do more face-to-face work with people when they're in their crises. So I went into the therapy world. And I was in my own personal relationship crisis and looking for a more full-time job. I'd been working in schools and psychiatric hospitals and other settings, therapeutic settings, military bases. And I happened to be hired by someone who changed my life, Dr. Rob Weiss. He's actually one of the pioneers of sex addiction research and treatment. And he took me under his wing and said, I'll teach you everything I know. And I strangely and surprisingly fell in love with the work. So, and I've kind of never looked back. I've worked with the addicts themselves and learned so much from them, and also the betrayed partners. And it's really powerful work.
Thank you so much for doing that. I wish I had found you a few years ago. But here we are. So after someone hits a relationship crisis, what are some important first tasks to take towards healing?
Right. The first steps that are important to take are first figuring out what kind of threat still exists. I'm a huge proponent. I just heard the previous speaker talk about how your body starts wiring around that trauma. And so when we are coming out of relationship crisis or currently in a relationship crisis, our body is just, our nervous system is really struggling to stabilize. And so if there is still lying or sneaking around, or the crisis behavior is still present, that absolutely needs to stabilize. The other thing is that you really need to seek out professionals to find out, if there's an infidelity issue, find a therapist or support system who specializes in it, because I promise you there's a difference. Just like when you're searching for a doctor and you have eye issues, you go to the eye doctor. If you have sinus issues, you're going to ear, nose, and throat doctor. I believe the same exists when you're trying to find the appropriate therapist to deal with the current issues. And I'm also, you're going to hear me say this several times, it's counterintuitive and doesn't make sense. But when you are coming out of relationship crisis, I feel like it's imperative to find a healthy, stabilizing group. So whether that group can be some loved ones that can be good listeners, don't tell you what they should or could or would do, don't judge you for staying, don't judge you for leaving, but can just be great listeners. Or they can be more in a clinical therapeutic setting, a 12-step group, things like that. So those are just a few things. Those really help you start building a language, developing a language for what happened, because we don't know until the S hits the fan. Yep. And then what needs to change from here on out to get me out of this so I don't find myself back in this again.
Yes, absolutely. And what is a good way to, or how do I build my intuition? Let's say, because you kind of like give it away, through gaslighting or through experience with a narcissist, for example.
Right.
How do you build your intuition back up after you've given so much of your power away to the experience, to the relationship trauma?
Right. Every relationship crisis, I think, comes with a heaping pile of either emotional abuse, physical abuse. Usually that's what develops the crisis. This is not what I signed up for. This is not the person who I thought I married. Those are usually the common circumstances that exist. And so those can really eat away at, I thought you were this person, but you're not. Maybe I have a bad judge of character for everybody. How did I not know about these lies? How did I not know about this? How could I have been blind to that? So a really important goal in the recovery process is what I call rekindling and rehoning your instincts and intuition. We all have very powerful and efficient nervous systems that are constantly scanning the horizon and interpreting what we call meta messages. So that's just nonverbal cues that a person's safe, this situation's safe. Oh, this reminds me of something that was scary. This reminds me of something that makes me feel like it's okay. And we really have to slow the process down, connect with those again, and use them as a tool to stay safe in the future. That's kind of all we have, right? Because we have no control about the other person. Are they going to be in recovery? Are they going to lie again? Is this going to happen to me again? One of the greatest, most empowering tools we have through the healing process is going, well, I don't know if I can prevent somebody else from doing this to me again. I'm vulnerable to this world, but I definitely feel like I have some agency now to pick up on these cues of that someone might be lying, or the behaviors change, or this environment doesn't feel safe anymore. These are the boundaries that I feel like I need to set to stay safe and stable. And one of the biggest things, again, that I'm going to say is rebuilding your intuition is talking to a therapist or professional in this field that knows how to ask these questions. We bring everything down to the minutia. How did you know? How did you not? What was the story you told yourself? The rationalization, the minimization, I'll just deal with that tomorrow. It'll be better when, and also engaging with a group setting and kind of doing that biofeedback system of telling your story, seeing their face expressions, hearing other people's stories and being like, how could you not be angry? Why aren't you angry right now? And that helps rebuild what you should be experiencing, what you should be feeling, where maybe previously it was disconnected.
Yeah. What you described, I don't know if this is the proper term, but that's how I understand it, is that hypervigilance, like not being able to trust, like, because when I went through the CPTSD, I was like, I was literally questioning every person in my life because I was like so shocked by the not knowing, and it just completely caught me off guard. I was asking questions like, how will I trust again? So what would you say to someone who's in that stage right now?
Right. That is an absolute common and reasonable response. Is I always say it's like dripping just one drop of red dye in a giant pitcher of water will alter the color of that entire pitcher of water. That is what one single significant person in your life lying or betraying you or engaging in regular emotionally abusive acts or behaviors, that's what the consequences are. Your body, your nervous system, that really great nervous system that works so hard to keep you alive, it's very efficient and it is very powerful, but it is not accurate. Its number one job is to keep you alive. It's not to keep you sane. So a lot of education initially, just letting you know that like anytime something really scary happens, your body records it hardcore in your body and like, don't forget this. This is bad. This is scary. This is going to kill you. And then the filter goes through to all things, where anybody who makes that face or any kind of similarity, that wide swath of generalization of this possibly could be a threat, exists. So again, that's why I think initially when you're rebuilding your intuition, learning to trust again, your nervous system is going to really, really struggle with your filtration of what's okay, what's not okay. And you're going to really need to start living in consultation. It's very similar actually to what addicts do when they're in recovery. It's like their best thinking leads to bad things all the time.
Yeah.
You, because of your abuse, neglect, betrayal, trauma, you also don't know daylight from darkness, right from wrong, because you've had someone, point to the sun and say, it's dark outside. Don't you see? It's not August, it's Christmas time. And so your understanding of like what is accurate, what's not what is accurate, what's not accurate, what's an appropriate boundary, what's an unreasonable boundary, that gauge is going to be off. And so again, you're going to have to lean towards trusting or feeling safe again with not the perpetrator, but maybe a therapist, life coach, a few supportive people, some people in your workshops or groups. And those steps help calm that nervous system that allow you access to feel vulnerable again, to trust again. Then you can kind of see if the person who harmed you, is worthy of those sentiments as well.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I wanted you to cover the topic of healthy versus unhealthy relationships. What are some signs that your partner is changing for the better? Like, let's say you're in a relationship and they want to make it work and they're like, oh, please forgive me. And, they go through their own thing and they want to reconnect with you. What are some signs that your partner is changing for the better?
Right. So the number one sign, in my opinion, is awareness of what's happened and a willingness, like a true humbleness and surrenderness to make amends and make it better. Without those two things, you'll go nowhere with the person, right? So if it is like, let's say, they committed infidelity and that was the crisis. If there's like, well, you stopped having sex with me. I don't really feel like you loved me, right? That's not acknowledging that what happened wasn't okay and I need to never do that again. And then obviously you're not going to have a humbleness around that. So you could be like, yeah, I cheated on you. I feel really bad. But I'm not willing to show you my phone to make sure you're not still texting the person. Or no, I don't believe in therapy. Therapy is for losers. There's not this humbleness and surrendered state where you're saying, yeah, I really blew it. And I need to take steps to help you feel safe again. The next thing that I like to see that usually doesn't come till much further down, and I do a lot of education in this, is the betraying partner understanding how their behaviors have really harmed the other person, right? So developing that empathy and compassion. So when, you text the person and they don't text you back for 2 hours, and you are understandably very dysregulated because they were doing nefarious, lying and sneaking around behaviors previously. So who knows what they've been doing for those past 2 hours when you haven't heard from them. A person who has developed education and empathy and compassion for what they put you through will meet that with a greater deal of understanding of like, yeah, I'm sorry, I was stuck in a meeting. It wasn't appropriate for me to text. I'm so sorry. I can understand why you're upset. Versus, oh my God, it was like 6 months ago. How much longer do I have to pay for this? How much longer are you going to punish me for the fact that I told you I don't do this anymore? All right, I'm done, right? There's two very, very strong responses. So it's empathy, humbleness, surrender, and empathy and compassion. Those are the main things.
Okay, I love that. I think you covered it, but my next question was, what are some red flags to look for? Basically, them not taking responsibility, right? Like not owning up to their
right. Part. Yeah, well, yeah, it's the opposite of what I just said, right? But if there's any kind of most giant red flags is if there's still any kind of lying, abuse, neglect of any kind, period. Any kind of shaming or belittling, right? Those defense mechanisms that Freud talked to us about, minimization, rationalization, right? That I get to do this because X, Y, and Z, or it wasn't that big of a deal. Why do you care? All those kind of behaviors are very, very concerning because it's the opposite of awareness, humbleness, surrenderness, and empathy and compassion. Any kind of behaviors where there's quid pro quo, like transactional, oh, if I do this for you, you better do this for me, or I did this, so you owe me this. Feelings of having someone have a power over you or a power under you versus just two flawed people trying their best to go about this world and sharing each other's experiences with each other, right? Non-defensively and compassionately. Yeah. Any kind of presence of threats, ultimatums, coercion, I'm going to leave if you make me go to therapy. I'm going to leave if you make me read one more self-help book. If you want a trial separation, I'm just going to file for divorce, things like that. Looking out for on the opposite end, right? That's the threat side. Looking on the opposite end for people who do more like nod to your face and then resent the heck out of you in the background. So fine, I'll go to therapy and I'll go through the motions, but I'll hate you the entire time. And I will make you pay for it through passive aggression or just like, what? Therapy's not working. Why not? I call it sometimes like chameleonizing. You can also call it just doing things out of duty and obligation versus like a true humbled, like, yeah, I screwed up. So I need to kind of humble myself and do what I need to do to start repairing this issue. And also the lack of repair attempts after a relationship crisis, after a time where your partner is capable of emotional abuse or lying or harming or manipulation. It's going to be rocky, right? Yeah. There's going to be 6 steps forward and 5 steps back. Yeah. There has to be a willingness to make a repair attempt, to have uncomfortable conversations. That is really, really huge. I really look for when the S hits the fan again, can we have conversations about it? Do we have a higher tolerance for uncomfortable engagement? That's really big for me.
Okay. Yeah, I love that. Pretty much like emotional intelligence to meet the person and just take responsibility pretty much. Can someone heal in a relationship, or does it need to be like alone? And do they need to go to therapy together, alone? What would you say to them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I get that often. I always say it depends. In a perfect world, what hits the fan, And I feel really unsafe with the person, and it's really disrupting my ability. Like, I don't want to sleep next to them. I don't want them in my room. We're arguing and screaming and throwing things at each other. We have small children. In a perfect situation, if you guys could create some space, you each seeing your individual therapist, start creating some stability and harmony, learning what happened, how to heal from it, what the recovery process is, engage into it, stabilize to the point that you can start meeting up into couples sessions. Sure, that's extremely ideal. Also takes a lot of resources, money, time, space, right? Sometimes people are living in a 2-bedroom apartment with 3 kids with limited finance, and that's just not an option. There might be a need, a dependency need of there's a health issue, or I need 2 parents in the home at the same time. So I will never assert whether something needs to happen that you can always work to heal in a relationship or out of the relationship, but it'll be harder for your nervous system to stabilize. You're gonna have to work really hard when, you're living in the same vicinity of someone who your nervous system feels like is like a psychopathic murderer. So it's going to have really strong responses. But we have exercises and approaches to help with that. So the answer is it just depends.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's a question from the audience. Does she recommend abstinence during this period of stabilization?
And I'm assuming that the person's asking abstinence as in separation in the coupleship. I'm not sure what the definition of abstaining from what, abstaining from engaging with the other person. And like I said, go ahead, please.
Let me just ask, it'll be easier than trying to type it up. What
Sure.
I meant was, and earlier you were talking about somebody who has left a relationship, I think. I actually typed it in a while ago at this point, maybe 10, 15 minutes. And like, if somebody's left a relationship and they're trying to stabilize themselves so that they don't go back into another relationship, do they abstain from sexual relations with people? You said you're a sex therapist as well within this, I believe.
Sex addiction and love addiction.
Sex addiction,
Yeah.
right. So should somebody who has found themselves in that space of finding one relationship after another, would it be a good idea to not only abstain from relationships, but also just sex in general because, of
Right.
the chemicals going off during that whole process, to sort of let themselves
Right.
regulate? And I was just curious about your point.
I would say it also depends. I would want to do a full assessment. I'm wearing my therapist hat right now, right? Someone is a trained sex addiction or love addiction therapist. I would want to do a really full assessment, a timeline. I'm really big on, we call any kind of sex addiction, love addiction, gambling, anything that's not substance. Like, I don't ingest a substance, get a chemical change. Instead, I'm doing a behavior to get a chemical change. So anytime there's a process of addiction, potentially, I really want to know the details about what happens in your life that leads you to go out, what's your pattern, what's your process, all the things that are involved in it, what you actually do, how often, how you feel during it, after it, etc. And then we break it all down. Very specifically, I do what we call a circle plan. They do these for both eating disorders and sex, love, intimacy disorders, because the idea is that it's not like alcohol, where I just notice alcohol is a problem. And so the idea is that I just abstain from alcohol, and then hopefully, I can start working on how I got here in the first place. Sex and love and engagement with other humans never stops, just like eating. You can't stop eating, but you just do it in a really disordered, unhealthy way. So we do what we call a center circle, a middle circle, an outside circle, and really hone into the behaviors or the nuances, the specific things that always lead to serious problems. Right? It could be as specific as I can never talk to Susie again, because every time I go out with Susie, it turns into violence, substance abuse, etc. Right? Or I can never date someone who is a substance abuser themselves, because they start drinking, I start drinking, it doesn't look good. I cannot for the next 90 days use pornography, because what happens is, and I don't want to get too detailed, but the pornography exposure one will lead to the next, and the next thing I'm looking for prostitutes, or the next thing is I'm looking for a one-night stand, and that it goes against another thing that we developed during this time, which is my values and goals. What is not working for you? Why are you engaging in these life changes? And what behaviors fall in line with those values and goals? I'll say, like, it's part of my, I have a relationship masterclass, and I spend a lot of time on helping clients develop what their values and goals are, things that they don't want to do anymore. I don't want to lie anymore. I don't want any more casual one-night stands. I do want to be married in 5 to 6 years. I do value having a family. I don't know, whatever it is. It's not my job to develop the values and goals. It's yours. It's your life. I don't put judgment on that. But once you tell me what those values and goals are, you bet your ass I'm regularly checking in to make sure your choices and behaviors are lined up with that. And it's a really great accountability system. Mm-hmm. So that kind of establishes what your sobriety will look like. And then we figure out what behaviors go with it and what are counterproductive to that. So I hope that answered your question.
Thank you. Fantastic.
What's the best way for our audience to reach you and to get your support?
Yes, I have a website, Kristin Snowden. It's KRISTIN Snowden.com. And my email is KristinSnowdenMFT@gmail. I have a lot of resources on there for everybody.
Perfect. And then I believe you have a bonus for our audience, for those who are interested in working with you.
So I was talking about values and goals development, circle plan, figuring out what your attachment styles are, setting boundaries, healthy communication, what is narcissism, what is sex addiction, all those things. I talk about that in this resiliency and recovery masterclass. If you have any questions about it, you are welcome to write me. But I just, I work at high-end treatment centers, and all I do is run groups. And I feel like the material and exercises I have for this are kind of what resonated the most with all the clients, what spoke to them the most, what they found most helpful when they were trying to move through their crises and struggles. So this is kind of what I feel like is the best of the best, this relationship masterclass.
I would like to thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you. I appreciate the work you've done, and I'm going to continue sharing your work with everyone going forward. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and it's been a pleasure. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a beautiful day.